Welcome to Her Drive, the nexus where stories of women from every corner of the globe unite. And for this special series, we are talking sovereignty. I'm Cynthia Cramblett, your host, entrepreneur, and a woman on a personal quest for self discovery and empowerment. Lately, the word sovereignty has been bouncing around in my mind as a question. What does it truly take to live self governed in a world that seems so adamant to keep women caged? And how do other women seem to do this so well? Driven by my insatiable curiosity, I've sought the wisdom of women whose lives exemplify sovereignty, each sharing their unique definition, the journey to claim it, and strategies to sustain it in today's modern world. These women include artists, sexuality and kink practitioners, healers, coaches, female health advocates, and much more. I invite you to join us as we celebrate the paths women must navigate, crafting their destinies with resilience. Together, we'll delve into their experiences from the echoes of triumph to the struggles in silence, exploring what it means to truly own one's power. I'm really excited you're here, a place where every voice is amplified, every story cherished, and the sovereignty of every woman encouraged and celebrated.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Her Drive podcast. This is the Sovereign series where I am, of course, talking with amazing, inspirational women and really focusing on women who embody sovereignty and truly hold the lantern for all of the rest of us who are seeking our own sovereignty or sovereignty within our own specific column of our life structure. And today's guest is Simone Farschi. She's a sex and intimacy coach and the founder of The Pleasure Plus. I had the joy of first witnessing her work on this show called Sex Life. I believe it was last year. And when I was watching the show and watching her work, I just was crying. And there were some of the practices I'd never seen any other coach do or have heard of. And it really just opened up a sense of exploration deeper into my own self. So, Simone, I'm so happy you're here. Welcome to Her Drive.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I absolutely adore this topic, and it really, I feel like, encompasses so much of my work and my life. So thank you for, dedicating some time for us to talk about it.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to dive into your story. What was the genesis of your life moving in a direction that you are now working in?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, that's such a huge question. And being a sex and intimacy coach, primarily working with women over the past 4 or 5 years, my whole purpose, I feel like, is driven to decomposting the patriarchy and basically like living as the most free and authentic version of ourselves that we possibly can. And my story was basically trying to figure that out as a very young girl, growing up in a very small town, and as someone that was, sexualized very young just based on my looks, based on being a woman of color, based on being, free and curious and sexual, which I believe that we all are. Birthright is our pleasure. Pleasure is our birthright. and and really it was about me having relationships that were not serving my true purpose and my authenticity. It was about like being in a relationship that looked like what I had seen in the movies, which isn't really how relationships work out, and not knowing how to problem solve, not knowing how to speak up for myself, not knowing how to communicate. And then, basically being 23, pregnant, having my son, and being in a relationship that was, manipulative, being with a narcissist, being at rock bottom, totally losing in touch with my femininity, my purpose, my confidence, and having to, find myself. And the way that I found it was through a lot of deep healing and personalized coaching that I did, which brings me to here right now, studying first and foremost about my sexuality and what I was not tapping into and what I needed to tap into to rebuild myself.
It's so interesting how a lot of growth always happens when we've hit the bottom.
Yeah, that tends to be, I mean, and I love that perspective too, because it's like anytime we're going through something really hard and painful to see it from that perspective and be like, wow, there's some real juice here. There's a reason why we are here.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you have knowledge on the maiden versus the witch, or the enchantress versus the mother archetypes, and the wise woman. And I'm just curious if you could walk through what the differences of those are, and if there's like a downside to, or I would say a shadow side to one, and then like the brighter, lighter side of the other. Because in my experience, in doing some self exploration, I realized that there was a breakdown in like my maiden wound, and like,
Mm.
okay, if there's a wound there, I have to go back all the way in my timeline to heal those aspects of me, to allow to disallow myself from living in, I don't know what else to call it, like the good girl syndrome that my society, my community wanted me to fully embody and never break out of, which didn't, it led to a lot of like shutting down of myself.
Yeah, and I think that story is slightly different for all of us, depending on our cultures and, you know, what we've been fed and taught. But yeah, that good girl playing into a specific kind of role. I remember I had a very like memorable moment. It was right before I was going to do an ayahuasca ceremony. And it was after I had my son, and I was really feeling into the princess versus the queen, like wanting so much, wanting to find my purpose, wanting to step into my mature self, and still feeling like I was embodying the princess. Not that I was being given or that I had like some cushy life necessarily, but that I was like, wow, there's really this leap of like responsibility when we go from, maiden to mother or princess to queen. And a lot of us, we're not really, there's a lack of ceremony and ritualistic aspects, taught to women when we're young to really let us understand like the rites of passage of maturation. So
Mm.
even, when we start our first bleed, when we become mothers, like when we start masturbation, when we learn how to embody our pleasure as our own and not for somebody else's pleasure, I think those are all moments that should be talked about more, that should be practiced more. And for me, that moment was like, like I don't know if I'm ready to be a queen, because that means that I have to take on a lot of responsibility. It means that I have to also be an example for other women out there, and that can be really scary for a lot of us because we don't have a lot of amazing examples out there to maybe to look at, but not actually to be mentored by and to understand what it takes to cross that path. So many of us end up crossing that path through some, experience, either a relationship or having a child, or maybe somebody in our family, like our own mother passing or going through something. And again, without much information given on how to tend to ourselves during that process.
Mm. Aw, that all hits so deeply. I'm curious, what are some, if someone was starting today and they wanted to, as a mother, wanted to create ceremony for their children and rites of passage, what would be some main ones that you would suggest that they hold on to and facilitate?
Yeah, I love that question. So I'm 36 right now. I have a 12-year-old son, just to give some perspective. And been doing this work most of my son's life, because his birth was really the reason for doing it. And so with that in my mind, I've always talked to him in a way that was never hiding anything about my body, being really clear about his body, about I think this idea of agency, like we have agency over our own body, and that pleasure is a beautiful thing. One of the biggest things that I talk to with parents about, and that a lot of people have questions, is like, how do I talk to my kids about sex? And it doesn't matter like how comfortable we are now with how we have sex, it still is going to cause us to feel uncomfortable when our kids come to us for the first time. And oftentimes what happens is we start speaking to them like we were spoken to from our
Mhm.
parents. And so I think it's really important to get really clear on how you want to be an example and how free you want to be in your household and with your partner or with your lovers. So, yeah, as far as a rite of passage or a ceremony is, speaking to pleasure as it is part of your body. And I always think about like how beautiful it would be if kids understood that when they connect to their bodies through pleasure, it's not something that's shameful, and that we can learn to really understand our bodies and understand the information that it holds. And
Mm.
that information can be a compass for us. And then with that, knowing like more about our own agency so that we can respect and talk to other, friends, kids, people with that same reverence and gratitude. I think that would eliminate so many of the issues that we have, and so many like, kids looking outside of themselves for, finding fulfillment, or even looking to porn as an example, because if they're getting that information from their families first and from their mothers, especially, yeah, I think it would just change the world so much. Um, yeah, and the same goes for like, our menstruation. Like my son, knows about, I call it my moon time. He knows that like I need extra, rest time and care. He understands like a woman's body. And I think that's another thing that's so beautiful and such a great practice to have as a rite of passage for both our children, boys or girls.
Mm. I love that. Going back into the point in regards to basically showing children or giving them the opportunity to have agency over their bodies and deeper understanding makes so much sense to me versus how we had like our simple sex ed class that was really brief and was basically like the mechanics of it. And then on the home front, my mom said, have sex with people that you love. Don't just do it with anyone. So there was kind of some information there, but I really had to piece it together. And I've always been suspect that if there were actual programs out there and richer conversations being had, I guess just with the parents, it would, like you said, facilitate a more healed community of adults.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I think just for kids to have the language and the yeah, because we so often it's like what to do, how not to get an STD, how not to get pregnant. Like maybe like your mom said, yeah, have sex with people that you love. But what if you have sex with somebody that you don't love? Then what do you do? And then what kind of shame are we feeling inside our bodies? And we feel like we're not the good girl, we're now the bad girl. But those experiences are going to happen. And so I think having more conversations around the those parts, that people don't really want to talk about, or what happens then, how do we tend to ourselves, how do we tend to our, the partner that we maybe didn't love, but that happened, and still respect them and teach them to respect us.
Mm, beautifully said. Outside of talking with parents and mothers specifically about how to engage in that conversation with their children, what else are you facilitating in your coaching and women's programs?
Yeah, so as you can probably remember on the sex life episode, you see me holding a circle of women, and we are doing the retreats that I do quite often, which we practice self pleasure. It's all done in the nude, so we talk about our body shame, how we feel about our orgasm. We learn to have different kinds of orgasms. We learn to practice, learning all about our anatomy of arousal. We look at our vulvas in a mirror, and we get to see everybody else's parts, the reason for that is because, as women, we hold so much shame around our bodies and oftentimes have not seen what other women look like. So the only visual like example we have is through porn, which is just kind of one style. And so often women feel like there's a lot of things wrong with them, when there's not. Like, diversity is so beautiful, the color, the shape, the size, everything. There's just so much beauty in that practice. And then we practice masturbation. So we get really comfortable with the ways in which we want to be touched. Why do we do this? Because, solo sex is the best way to have partner sex, like by reconnecting. Our connection with our body creates confidence. It creates us to tap in, to know how to explain what it is that we like, what it is that we don't like. And it's just like a really beautiful, creative, erotic practice that is like de-stressing, creates better sleep. It's so good. So that's really what I'm all about. I'm about self-pleasure and the reasons why it should be a normalized practice.
That's so beautiful. I think what really threw me when I saw the show was the showing each other's vulvas,
Uh-huh.
doing like show and tell. And when I saw that, I remember having like a strong reaction of like, oh no, I wouldn't want that for myself, even though like I love being nude. I have no problem with being nude, but like to just like that's the focal point brought up a lot for me. So I love that this is something that you do, and it seems like it's a strong de-armoring technique. So when you're in that space with these women, what are some of the responses that you see?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So a lot of women feel exactly the same as you. It's like, oh my gosh, that's like an edge. It's really uncomfortable. Why would I do that? But there is also that thread of like, I know this would be so good for me. I know that I need to get past the fear and the shame and the stories and, why I'm not having sex with my husband anymore, why I feel uncomfortable in my body after having kids, why that traumatic experience is still latching onto me and I can't move past it and I can't feel pleasure and I feel numb, all of those things that prevent us from walking in the world, talking about sovereignty, feeling strong in our bodies, like recognizing that our pleasure is our power, that our sexual energy is our creative energy, tapping into that. So the curiosity is often greater than the than the reasons not to come and show up.
Mm.
And so women walk away feeling like, I mean, first of all, it's like we come into the workshop and we all get undressed. So we're sitting in circle naked. And even for people that are used to being naked, that can be a very like, oh my gosh, like sitting naked the entire time, looking at each other, it just brings up things because we as women, we have this natural kind of competition to other women a lot of the times, or we have these sister wounds, these mother wounds. And it's great because by doing that, we get rid of that right away. And then so by lunchtime, women are like, wow, this feels so comfortable. This feels so natural. Like, women don't want to put their clothes on. Like at lunch, they're like, actually, like, this is how we should be. And that's so, it's so liberating. It's so liberating to feel that comfortable in your body so quickly around other women and sisters. And then beyond that, like with the vulva show and share, again, it's that feeling of like deep like secrecy and shame and like tears. And then after you do it, you feel so liberated. And there's nothing like it. Like, I've never experienced anything like it, where you get to like, these other women get to witness you and you get to be this focal point of beauty. And we're just like, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful. Like, exclaiming all these parts of what you look like, and to be witnessed in that way. Like, that doesn't even happen often with the people that we make love with. Yeah. So it's really, really beautiful. Oh.
So powerful. Well, I appreciate that work, and I did your vulva mapping that you, as of right now, it's a free download. And I love the exercise of like drawing my yoni.
Mhm.
And it made me cry. And from a personal note, because I have no filter here, I had a partner who would told me like how ugly my vulva was. and he would never like go down on me. Sure sign, like end the relationship. But anyway, so I have had so much shame since those comments were made, that I have not been like sexually active, and like, or when I have been, it's been like, don't really look. And that wasn't me prior to that. So in doing your exercise, and it's more than just drawing, everybody, there's so much more to this magic that you created. It really helped me get more attuned with my power source, and I'm so grateful to you for that, because it released somebody else's imprint that they placed upon me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. And yeah, unfortunately, that's the truth. You know, we have one moment in our history where somebody said something, and we just hold on to that, and we hold on to that as the truth. And it really takes the practice of reconnecting with our own body, like giving her reverence, giving her a space to shine, like, you know, those mantras of reminding ourselves that we are beautiful, that we are powerful, that we're glowing, that we are whole. And yeah, that's why it's a practice. You know, I say sex is learned. It's not something we just know how to do. Same with our own pleasure. It's like we have to remind ourselves that it's all available to us, and yeah, stay in touch with it.
Magical. Well, you'd mentioned like sisterhood wounds, motherhood wounds, etc. Can you outline what some of those may look like?
Yeah. So, you know, you probably have felt it before when you walk in a room full of women and you look around and you're like, who are my friends here? That feeling of like, I don't belong. I don't want to, you know, speak over other people, or you are the, you know, the one that feels like you have to fluff your feathers so much in order to get the attention of the other women in the room, or that feeling of being around, you know, a guy that you like, or with your partner, and walking into a room and feeling like all of a sudden you have to claim him, because you have been, you know, you've been betrayed by a woman before, or either like the echoings of your mother's voice, like telling you that you are, you know, either not good enough or need to be better, or, you know, that constant like primping and primming. It just runs deep, you know, what we have, the feelings we have around other women, when it really should. And I think we all know this and want this, should be like, oh, I want supported sisterhood. I want to come together in groups of women and feel safe in my body, feel safe to express whatever's happening and be held in that. Like, I think we deeply, deeply, deeply are missing being held and nurtured, by other women and sisters. And so, yeah, part of the work is like remembering that and recoding how we are with other women, you know, and especially now with social media and Instagrams, it's like we're constantly comparing ourselves with who's prettier, who's better, who's more successful, like all of these things. And that is that like deep wounding of that sister wound, of the mother wound, of like, we need to be better in order to be validated in ourselves. So a lot of the work that I do is all around kind of dismantling that and crumbling that, and trying to connect other women to other women, and just supporting each other, supporting our work. Like, no longer do I believe it should be about the competition and only I, you know, singularly do this to be successful, but like, how can we do things together to support each other, to uplift each other, so that we can make it easier? Like, fuck, it's been so hard for us women anyways. And it's like, I was just watching this documentary called The Janes. It's all about this group of women in the 60s that created this basically like safe abortion group, this underground safe abortion. And it just talks about like how we try and try and try, and it feels like we're making progress in the modern times, and somehow like it gets swept away. And like, so we are still constantly fighting for our rights to be sovereign. and and yeah, like you mentioned witches earlier, right? It's like, if we are doing this work, we're thought to be witches, or super hippie, or, it's just, yeah, it's interesting living in these modern times and trying to really expand the ideals of what a woman should be and how women should be treated.
Well, if you had a magic wand, and I believe you do already, but like a really powerful, like could wave it and like the fabric of society modifies to permit sovereignty for women, like what would be the most, like what would be the thing that you'd want to change with your wand immediately?
Oh my gosh, wow. I had a magic wand. Well, I really do believe, it begins with our kids. I feel like changing the way that we educate our youth is how we're going to change the world, because it begins with how they are experiencing their own bodies or shame about their bodies. The first experience we have sexually that leaves such a big imprint, how we believe that we're supposed to show up for men or women. And if there was more conversations around that between, young teenage adult kids, then that would set the precedent for so much moving forward. So ultimately, the goal for me is to have an impact in that, to have an impact in public schools, and just education all around, and how to talk about our sexuality, our pleasure, our agency. Yeah.
Beautiful. I love it. Fully on board. What do you think the resistance is for the depth of conversation around intimacy is in the United States rather than what it's like in other countries?
That's a great question. Well, I think that, you know, the word intimacy, when we talk about that, a lot of people go straight to thinking about sex, penetrative sex. And there is so much more than that. Like, intimacy really is actually just being able to be vulnerable with another person and be able to share your deepest parts and have honest conversations. Again, that's something that is so not really practiced or available to learn in our culture, in our society. All the movies and films we see, we just see these like very big dramatic like moments of love and heartache, and so that's what we imagine our relationships should look like, and we very much mirror them, and there's not a space for the in between. So same with sex. So there's so many parts of holistic sexuality. It encompasses, sexualization, our health and reproduction, our communication, our love, our friendships. So there really is just a huge amount that's lost in what we understand about ourselves and about the other in intimacy. And I think that other cultures have that, like there's so many cultures that, like, when you say hello, you kiss on both sides of the cheek and you give each other a hug and you look each other in the eyes. I was fortunate enough to live in Mexico with my son for the years of the pandemic. And so much of my nervous system was just like relaxed. And I loved it. I loved it for my son because the values were not so much around success and money and what we had, but it was really around coming together as community and, sharing meals together and just enjoying like the very simple things that you do in a day. And I feel like, since moving back and just reflecting on living in this Western United States culture, that it's we separate ourselves so much more. There's not room for celebrating those small moments of connection.
Mm. That's so magical. I was once married to an Italian, and
Mm.
I saw like an Italian American, but his parents were both immigrants. And immediately upon meeting them, I realized strong cultural differences between his family and mine. And one of the things that I loved about his family was that you would get up and greet the person who came in the room. And like whenever it was time to leave, they would go around and like say goodbye to everyone. And I just thought that that's such personalization and shows such care. And I go back and visit my family often, and I notice that they don't get up. They're like, okay, bye sis. Whereas I integrated that practice that I saw from my ex-husband's family into no, let me actually honor you in this moment. And it was such a beautiful realization to see. So I can see why you being in Mexico during that time would create that contrast and a deep relaxation. And in a sense, for me, it's like coming back to the reality that is being human is coming together.
Mm.
And you had mentioned that people are kind of looking, I think, looking for community. Women are looking for connection, and we're very starved for affection and being honored by other women. So, outside of coming to your retreats and doing coaching, what are some ways that women can start to execute this in their own lives today?
Yeah, I think just by noticing, tracking your own feelings when you're around other women, maybe even when you're looking at somebody's, Instagram that you feel a charge around, usually it's that feeling of like, "Ooh, I want to know this person or be this person." And then it's kind of like, "Oh, I hate this person," like they have everything I don't have. So
Mm.
being real about that, being like, wow, I have those feelings. Like, where does that come from? Why do I have that? And instead of like, you know, letting that competition marinate and create this self shaming, like leaning into it and maybe like reaching out to that woman and being like, wow, I really love your content. Like, I would love to learn from you. Or do you want to collaborate in some way? Or, yeah, I think just leaning into the how can we collaborate? How can we work together? How can I, or even just like sending a nice message. It's like every time I receive something like that from a woman, I'm more inclined to share that and spread that. And I think that's where it starts, is just being very real and honest about our feelings and our desires to connect rather than like putting on a show. Yeah.
Yeah, I think authenticity wins out every time, and not being afraid to reach out to that person that sets you on fire in some way.
Yeah.
Mm.
Hmm.
And I love that you mentioned like, oh, I hate this person, or like I sometimes like it translates as envy or jealousy, or
Yeah.
oh, I wish I were that embodied or that powerful or that creative or da 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 da. To me, when those feelings come up, I try to then alchemize them into being inspired by them. And like, wow, if they did that, how can I then use my own skill sets to create something like that in my own life? And it removes the competition, but it takes recognizing number one, oh, I'm feeling jealous. Why?
Yeah, I love that. I love that you said that, alchemizing it and then using it for inspiration. And, there is such thing as healthy female competition, right? Like we are also there to inspire each other, to remind each other of our greatest potential, so that we can be the best and highest versions of ourselves. So remembering that too and being like, wow, this woman is like really inspiring me to push my growth edges. And that's beautiful. And again, like complimenting that person too, being like, I've seen this in you, like I'm trying to get to this point, you're really like being an inspiration to me, thank you for that. Like that's the other side of the coin of being inspired by each other.
Mm, magical. Well, if you could go back in time and give a younger you some words of advice, how old would you be and what would you say?
Let me think about this. I would go back to being about 21, 22, and I would tell myself, I would just remind myself not to be afraid to be alone, to really dive deeper into myself, to understand my truest desires, to not look outside of myself for that. I think at that moment I was really looking for something, anything to help me become the person that I wanted to be so badly.
Mm.
Again, I think I was just so influenced by our culture and our media that, like, once you finish college, then all of a sudden you should be something successful and have everything figured out. It's like not like less about the journey and more about the goal. and just like really remind myself to slow down and savor and make as many, mistakes as I possibly could and try out as many new things, and not to find that in necessarily in a relationship or a man, but like really dig deep into myself to unearth those things. Yeah.
Mm, mm. Very relatable. Totally get it. And for those who are kind of waking up to that reality of, oh, shoot, I've been kind of living someone else's narrative or viewpoint of me, what's your advice to them?
Hmm. Well, if you are coming to that realization, that's a beautiful thing, because that means that you can pause, take a breath, and you know, re-navigate. And I think, first of all, it's like not shaming ourselves, but looking and being like, okay, this is something I've been doing and I want to take a different path. And then, find a mentor. I think it's so valuable to find a mentor, and we don't glamorize that enough. We kind of like think it's like, oh, why do I need somebody else? But that's another thing. If I could go back in time, I would really find somebody that I could look up to and learn for them, because that can accelerate our growth so much. It's somebody that can hold us accountable for our dreams and our visions, somebody that we can, learn from. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I would love to talk a little bit about the male female dynamic from your lens, and what are some common challenges that you help your clients navigate within their relating to the masculine, or I guess even partnerships in general.
Yeah. So I work with a lot of couples on just wanting to accelerate and expand their sensual and sexual practice, just because, they're already doing great, but they want to do better. They want to know and learn a lot more. And that's a really fun space to work with couples on. And then, of course, there's all the challenges. It's like sex after kids, it's mismatched desires. So like one person has a deep desire for something and their needs are not being met. One person is much more sexual and has a higher sex drive than the other. So finding time, or not shaming the person that wants the sex more, or doesn't want the sex that much. And um, and then also I do a lot of work on just like, yeah, like teaching people about how to explore each other's bodies. Like, again, going back to the education, like so many men have learned how to please their partner based off of what they've seen in porn, which isn't really a realistic view. And many of the women have never had experiences beyond what their first experience was with the man. So again, like that education is not coming from themselves, it's coming from a source outside of ourselves. So just re-educating and reacquainting like what pleasure truly looks like for you, and how to teach your lover that, and ask the right questions so that you're giving your lover what they want to.
I love that, the asking, the being curious, not
Yeah.
judgmentally curious.
Yes, all of it comes down to being more curious. Like, let us all play more, let us all be more in our childlike state. Let's all, yeah, I think that's what really keeps relationships fresh and exciting and keeps the spark alive, is remembering that we don't know everything, even about ourselves, and much more about our partners.
Absolutely. And I love the conversation around sex after kids, or these pivotal moments where we just change. I've never had children, so I can't really speak to that personally. But what are some major shifts that happen, and how does that alter relations with not only with our own bodies, but with our partners?
Yeah, well, the first 2 years after having a kid, I feel like for the woman and for the man, that's like the biggest, most dramatic shift, because you've basically, as a woman, you've just given your body to create this being inside of yourself, and then after you've given birth to it, like still for the next 3 or 4 months, your body's still not itself, so you're just coming back into your body and you don't even really know who you are. Like, you have passed threshold from maiden to mother. So it's recalibrating, getting to know again, like all of those self-pleasure practices to be like, who am I now? And for the male partner or partner in the situation who's outside of this experience, they're very much like intimacy deprived, like, wow, all this attention is going to this new little being, and where do I stand on this? Like, what happened to our relationship? Because it changes, it really does change. And again, I think there's not enough conversation that prepare people for that. It's just like, yeah, you're having a kid, that's amazing, da, da, da. But I think mapping out a plan of how you're going to handle the hard things before the things get hard is a really good idea. And that can be not only for just having kids, but any kind of like major shifts that happen in a relationship, like career change or moving, or all those various things. And yeah, like it all goes by so fast, so really, really appreciating the times when you are like, actually, I don't feel sexual now, and I really want to just like tend to my motherness, or what do we look like as a couple, as parents, and refocus the relationship in that way. And then sexually also, like, yeah, the self-pleasure, like self-pleasuring together. So again, you're taking the pressure off of needing to perform or needing to give or receive, but still being in a space of intimacy together. I'd say time is like really the biggest factor once you have kids. It's like, how do we re-navigate our time together? Like this morning, I was just waking up. I had my lover here with me, and like I had to, didn't get much sleep last night. And then I had to get up and get him to school. And then I, was preparing for this podcast and like barely got any kisses in between. It's like, oh, I just wanted to spend some more intimate time. But it's like, okay, that didn't happen. Like, let's figure out how we can plan better and make it still sexy and spontaneous, even amongst a very like routine schedule.
Magical. It takes a lot of forethought.
It does. And if you're not that kind of person, like I am not, I like to like live everything spontaneously. It's just about understanding that and then creating like planned spontaneity, I guess it is.
Yeah, I like to create like windows or days where I'm like, okay, I'm not doing anything this day. That's for me personally. I don't have
Yeah.
a partner right now, but it helps me be like, okay, it's a free for all. It's guilt free. I don't have to worry about all the million things that I'm doing. So let's play.
Yes, I love that. I love that too. I work similarly, where I will plan days and just be like, I am so in the present moment. There's nothing planned today. And I think that's so beautiful to be able to do that. Gift yourself that time.
Mhm. Speaking of play, I saw recently that you have been incorporating some BDSM toys into, I think, your education and exploration. And I am someone who loves kink, loves BDSM. Recently, did a dominatrix training because I think that that area is just really fun to play with. Simultaneously, it is has been healing and opening for me in very deep ways that were totally unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone with your background and in your profession, I would just love to know where you're at with all of it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Thank you for tracking my new updates. And yeah, BDSM and kink, I think for one, it's something that everybody's so curious about. And again, it's something that feels can be portrayed in such an extreme way, 50 Shades of Grey, or just like this very like domineering, female in her black leather cat suit, and like it's one kind of role. So what I've learned and what I love incorporating is letting people know that kink and BDSM is available to everybody. It's really about nurturing the desires and core erotic themes that you have and being able to cater to them as an individual and in relationship, which is such a beautiful thing. It's so sexy to be able to like really understand and be understood and be seen and like create this space. BDSM and kink, like you really have to set up the parameters of trust and communication. And so I think it's really a prerequisite for every relationship. Because you learn how to ask the right questions, to communicate, and to go to these like incredible subspaces where you can just like let go of all of it and be held and be nurtured by your lover. And yeah, so I'm definitely incorporating it in my one-on-one coaching sessions and helping people learn how to set up the scenes, how to tap into their dominatrix, or learn more about sensual submission, sensual domination. And I will be very soon, which I'll be announcing, of some workshops that are coming up. So that'll be really fun.
Yay!
Yeah,
Congratulations. I love that for you.
yeah, you'll have to come.
I would love to. And I guess one last question I have is, what is your definition of sovereignty?
My definition of sovereignty is being being wildly authentic, um, loving oneself and the evolution of change, being able to courageously ask for one's desires and needs while also knowing that you can meet those needs and receive everything you need from within. Yeah.
So powerful and beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, great questions.
Yeah, well, the floor is yours. If there's anything else you'd like to conclude with.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess I'll just leave with saying that I really enjoyed talking with you. I think that more conversations amongst women and our sovereignty is what's going to help be an example for somebody else that's going through a tough time or doesn't know that there's information or mentors available. I want to invite anyone that's listening that connected to any parts of this story to feel free to reach out to me for mentorship, or just share where you're at, because I definitely know firsthand how hard it can be when we're in those circumstances where we feel trapped or unfree, or like we can't be ourselves and don't know how to even start that path. And yeah, I really, this work is my passion and my purpose. And so inviting you to, if you feel any bits of like nervousness, but like, oh my God, that's what I need to do, like I invite you to come join my workshops. I'll be doing my next one in June, the last weekend in June, up here in Northern California. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. I also, like I said, or like you said, I have a free vulva mapping workbook, which you can download off of my website, which is thepleasureplus.com. And you can find all of my content and resources at my Instagram handle at thepleasureplus.
Brilliant, beautiful. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence, with your knowledge, with your energy. And I look forward to connecting with you in the future.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for witnessing this episode of Her Drive Sovereign, and I invite you to celebrate with us on summer solstice for a retreat for women by women. To learn more, visit her-drive.com/events, and cheers to sovereignty. Love you, ladies.